Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. I'm your host, Wendy Nystrom. Today's special guest is Tony Kono. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for having me.
Anytime. Now, you have a very unique background. You are a senior publicist and marketing executive who decided to basically change the world with your very own hands. Could you tell people how you got, how you went from a marketing executive to an environmental expert?
Well, the marketing executive part dates back to my days as a reporter and producer and host at Bloomberg News and Radio. And then later, as I transitioned to a career in financial PR, my wife and I decided to move to the Jersey Shore from North Jersey. And we were following her mom down here who had retired. And shortly after we moved, about a year and a half after we moved, about a mile from Maniloking Bridge, for anybody who's from New Jersey is already going to know where I'm going with this. A lady named Sandy visited us, and she had a superstorm with her. Now, I wasn't just responding to Superstorm Sandy and the devastation it caused our community. I had been involved in my own mind as a boy living on Shinnecock Bay out in Long Island and going to environmental camp and going to school at Middlebury in Vermont. So I was aware that the planet had some issues. But when Superstorm Sandy happened and it washed the entire town of Mantoloking away, I live about a mile across the Barnegat Bay in Bricktown, New Jersey, and most of the town of Mantoloking ended up in my front yard. My wife and I looked at each other and we said, we got a problem.
Yeah.
And we did. And I could tell you the months and even years and even to this day, all of the implications that has meant for our community.
Well, I want to actually go back. You said you went to environmental camp that your grandmother, I believe, set you up with. That's pretty remarkable that someone would send you to an environmental, where you'd learn about the ecosystems and the environment. Could you tell a little bit about where that was and why she sent you there?
Well, I wouldn't say that my parents were hippies, but in the late 60s and early 70s, everyone was a hippie, kind of.
Yeah.
Even my grandmother, frankly. And she had a home, and my mother still lives in the home on Shinnecock Bay and Hampton Bays in New York. And we would just be seining, with the nets and taking out fish, and we would just look at them and put them back. And I guess my grandmother noticed that my first cousins and I had a real interest in that. And there was some camp, I can't remember the exact details, but it was in the Shinnecock Bay area. And every day or, once a week or whatever, I can't remember the exact details of how it was. We would go to the camp and we would learn about what was in the bay, how to protect it, what some of the dangers were. And that was back in the 60s and 70s. I think a lot of the dangers back then were different than what they are now. I don't think that people were thinking so much about overdevelopment and stuff like that has gone on since then. But it was just about, making sure that your fishing gear, that you take it back with you and that you don't create a wake in shallow waters to disturb the environment and things like that. So we had that experience from childhood.
I love the fact that you started with that base and you understood that there are certain things that do need to be protected and taken care of. We do need to not pollute, need to be careful. Don't, pick up your mess when you leave. And then you transition to this, executive communications, public relations for financial firms.
Yep.
Which is pretty remarkable in its own sense, because you said that you've done thousands of interviews for Bloomberg and on your own.
Yep.
And then, you moved to the Jersey Shore. Superstorm Sandy, of course, devastating for people who aren't aware. Giant storm about 7 or 8 years ago, just waylaid the entire eastern seaboard. And then you decide, I am going to take things into my own hands, quite literally. And you have become known as the Trash Man of Brick, which is an awesome title.
Well, taking things into my own hands, I didn't really have much choice. Superstorm Sandy was October 29th, 2012. So it's actually going to be, we just had the 11th anniversary last fall.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have a lot of choice about taking things into my own hands because the devastation of the storm really went basically from Atlantic City all the way out to Montauk. So it was over about 250 miles worth of damage. So authorities were strapped. There wasn't anybody. A lot of what happened was left up to us. My next door neighbor happened to be the chief of police of Mantoloking, which was the town directly across the bay from where we live in Brick that got so devastated, one of the most devastated towns on the whole shore from Sandy. And so, we didn't have power for 15 days. We bought food for 2 days. We didn't know what was going to happen. Luckily, they were more, entrenched in the community. And I mean, things like the high school was cooking hamburgers, putting them in the trunk of their car and bringing them down to us. And we ate hamburgers out of the trunk of a car for several days until finally there was some food access. So,
Oh, wow.
and what happened was that there was so much trash on the ground. And I don't just mean trash. I mean, there were beams of buildings and pieces of the roofs, and just to
Debris.
get around, we had to move that stuff out of the way. And so that's not exactly when the trash man of brick began, but in terms to respond to your point about taking things in our own hands, we didn't have a choice. We couldn't get out of the house unless we did it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, just moving. So I know that the trash man of brick didn't happen immediately, and there was a transition. But in 2017, you did attend Rutgers University, which is a very well-known university in New Jersey,
Sure.
as well as nationwide. And you got your certification in environmental stewardship.
Yep.
Was that triggered by Sandy, or did you decide I really want to focus on
100%. So what happened is right after Sandy, we had a new mayor in Brick, and I went and met with him and told him my trash story. And by then it was some months later, and I said, even before the storm, the main road called Mantoloking Road, I said, it always has trash on it. Isn't there anything we can do about it? It's the main, people would drive from the parkway to the beach, and our town would look like it was a trash strewn, even before Sandy, community. I said, shouldn't we pretty it up? And he explained to me it was a county road and all the politics. And he said he would ask the county to stay more on top of it. And he did. And we got better at it. But I would go out at least at the end of my part of the road and start to clean it up. He appointed me to be on the environmental commission at that point. He appointed me to be on a smaller commission and then later to the environment commission. But then by 2017, I was poised to be appointed to the chair of the Environment Commission. And as part of all of that, I thought that I needed more accreditation in terms of giving myself some bona fides about, what that meant. And because we work with the township planning board. So I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. I'm a boy from New York City, but we were doing things that had to do with the Bay and approving projects that may or may not impact the water quality and things like that. So I did attend 60 hours of classwork and then a 60-hour project where I worked with the New Jersey Osprey Project to help them identify the health of the osprey population in New Jersey, and receive my official New Jersey environmental steward certification in the fall of 2017. So it wasn't specific to my Sandy experience. It was just, and I've remained friends and close to those people and utilized both the staff who run that program and other stewards who I've met who have helped us. There are several stewards who are down here in our community who help with the trash mitigation. So it's a community of like-minded people who are trying to help preserve not only the Barnegat Bay, but their local communities as well. And so it was a terrific thing, and it was a great networking experience. And I got a little certificate that I have hanging on my wall.
Don't you just love the little certificates that you accumulate? But going back, getting your certificate and actually doing the homework, because a lot of people would just run out and say, I'm just going to be an environmentalist, but I'm not going to do any of my homework. So that's when mistakes happen, and we've seen some of those mistakes come to fruition. But you actually got your certificate. You went and did part of the commission. And the favorite part for me personally is you don't just preach it, you do it. Yeah. A lot of people, don't know how to start. They'll say, I don't know where to begin. I don't know. I put my own brick wall in front of me and I don't know how to get past it. But you also said, listen, I can't expect other people to clean up garbage, which will eventually end up in our waterways that gets blown into. We all know this. I'm going to do it myself and be an example, which I think speaks powerfully about what you are doing.
Yes. So, what happened was the internet was a little bit more innocent back in that period of time in 2012 and 2013. And there was a site called the New Jersey Hurricane News and Jersey Shore Hurricane News, excuse me. And I became friends with Justin, the editor, and we met and stuff. And he would I'd post myself picking up trash around town, and then he'd post it. And then I did it again, and he posted it again. Well, all of a sudden, Channel 2 in New York, they're not quite the network, but they reach 50 million people in our region, called me and said, we want to do a profile on you. And
I love it.
And I called the mayor and I said, are we okay with this? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And I called the secretary of the Environment Commission, who's an employee of the town. I said, this is going to happen. He's like, sound great. And they did a little 3-minute segment on me that ran over one weekend about 6 or 7 different times. And they were actually the ones, one of the members of the Environment Commission dubbed me the trash man of Brick, but that was kind of where I got the moniker, because they even, in the lower third, they put, lower third is TV talk, they identified me as the trash man of Brick. And so the mayor started, after that ran, and the mayor gave a quote, and you can find that online if you just Google trash man of Brick. It became sort of who I was. In fact, that's my logo that my wife created for me, the trash man of Brick, that one day I'm going to get around to making T-shirts for. and
Absolutely.
yeah, and so one thing led to another, so that the mayor and people in town hall who knew me stopped calling me Tony and started calling me the trash man. So I think they forgot my regular name. So, but and then what happened was, as a result of that, we said, well, what can we do on the Environment Commission? We was like, well, let's do something. Let's create a program where we pick up brick. And we started promoting that. And we started asking Boy Scout groups and Girl Scout groups and other volunteer groups, school groups, to come out and help us. We could only do it on town property because we were an official or a organ of the government, appointed by the mayor. But there's plenty of town properties that are adjacent to water down here, parks and such. And so on a regular basis, 6, 8, one year we did 12, I think. We would go out with groups of 20 and 30 people. Sometimes we would get 100 people, depending on what the project was, and just go out and pick up trash and, put it in trash receptacles, and then township BPU would come and take it away. And we got some press on that as well. So it started to build its own momentum by having that clever name. And it all started with me having a local journalist online posting my picking up trash on his Jersey Shore Hurricane News website.
But obviously you were right on.
Hard to believe that all happens.
But you touched on a pulse, though, because for the Channel 2, CBS News, to play that clip 6 or 7 times over the course of a weekend, that's not normal. That doesn't happen regularly. That is a special thing. They saw something that needed to be said over and over and over again, which is we need to start. Well, it would be ideal if we didn't generate the waste to begin with, if we had things that were less, single use and more reusable. But pick up after yourself. I mean,
it's just that simple.
It is really that simple. I mean, I grew up in, as a kid watching, don't give a hoot, don't pollute. I remember that tagline. Don't drop your garbage for other people to pick up for you. And I think we've kind of lost that way. And what you're doing is you're bringing that messaging back to take pride in your community, take pride in yourself, but teaching people around you. So Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, community, that's huge.
Young people in particular. Yeah. The other, not only was there give a hoot, don't pollute, but there was the crying Indian, even though that gentleman was actually Sicilian. But that's a whole other story.
Sicilian, yes. That's another story.
That's a famous story. But when we do these pickups, oftentimes like the parents of the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and community groups will say, oh, remember the crying Indian, whatever happened to him? And I said, he's right here today. We're doing it. So
yeah. I mean, it's that messaging, and again, the repetition that we have to do to get people to get it sinking in their brains is what you're doing. And it's so important, and to keep doing it, just constantly being out there. But if people, let's talk about you in particular and the work you're doing. How do people get involved? What would you say to someone who's like, I don't know what to do. I have these hesitancies. What would be the first thing you say to someone, do the following to get started?
Well, I don't know. In our community, because we are so attached, Brick Township has more waterfront property than any other community in New Jersey. And that's the quirk of, in the 1930s, in all of the salt marshes, they dug out these canals with the idea of building homes along them. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's true. And all those communities have been built out. But we are very much positioned right on the Barnegat Bay. So as a result of that, years ago, one group in particular called Save Barnegat Bay finally kind of threw their hands up and organized themselves about 50 years ago, because there was one property that was adjacent to the National Wildlife Refuge that is part of our community here and extends from Brick Township all the way to Atlantic City, which is about 50 miles. It's about 35,000 acres of the Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge. And there was one piece of private property that was adjacent to the wildlife refuge that they were going to develop. And Save Barnegat Bay got involved. This was before my time down here. And basically, it got the government to purchase that and include it in through a long battle, and that's a story for another time. But and got them to include it into the wildlife refuge, and then
Oh,
they
wow.
sort of became. And there was another group called Clean Ocean Action that was based in Monmouth County that were instrumental in stopping ocean dumping of garbage, which went on until 1990, believe it or not, in New York. My high school was on the East River, and we would see the garbage barges going out to the sea, just opening up the bottom and dumping New York City's trash 12 miles or 20 miles offshore. I can't remember exactly. And so those two groups that I'm familiar with and have worked with since I moved down here, Clean Ocean Action and Save Barnegat Bay, are local and looking for volunteers and have all kinds of projects that they're trying to do. Save Barnegat Bay has really become activist, and the leader of it, Britta Forsberg, is an attorney, so she knows how to work the system too, and really lead change where it needs to be, where there's a development that doesn't seem appropriate, or where there's a settlement for a brown site that might not necessarily be what is right for the town or for the bay. She's leading the charge. And so I've been involved with those two groups in particular, with the Environment Commission in Brick, and then other smaller groups too. There's a young man who just does cleanups on his own that he's on Facebook, and I'll go and join him as well. So get involved with those local groups is what I would say, because almost every community has some.
Find your people. I always tell them, it's like, find your people, and people that you share the same compassion with, the same interest with, the same quality of life, and it'll just snowball. I mean, there's so many groups that I know of around me that 10 years ago I didn't, just because I was still working the corporate world and I was in my own little bubble. But once you start looking around, and now that we have social media, it's so much easier.
Yes.
So much easier to find these organizations. So before I let you go, though, how do people find you? If someone wants to say, I want to talk to Tony, I want to find out how I can get involved either in Brick or somewhere in New Jersey, what's the best way to find you?
Well, I'd like to think that I'm trying to professionalize this in some way. I mean, I am just a volunteer. I'm not paid by the Environment Commission. I do get every year when we run our Green Fair, which has become one of the most successful and popular in all of the Jersey Shore towns. Last year, I think we had about 60 different vendors there. It was quite big. I would recommend that you can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn, both for my professional work and for my Trash Man of Brick environmental work. I'm on social media too. If you like the New York Rangers, I think you can see my logo here. I do a lot of ice hockey there, so that might not be for everybody. But I am on social media, and my Instagram tag is the Trash Man of Brick. So, but I think LinkedIn's probably the best place, because I really am passionate about the idea of us trying to do something in a professional way, whether it's volunteer, but to professionalize it in a way that we're organized, and we're, my group, the Environment Commission, partnered with another group of volunteers last year, over a 2-year period, to preserve the Bretton Woods, which was the last largest developable piece of property in Brick Township from a major home builder, from tearing it all down and building 60 homes there. And over a 2-year period, we fought that fight together, and eventually got the town and the county to come to an agreement with the builder to buy the property and preserve it forever. And that's probably our best and greatest achievement yet. But that's what I mean in terms of professionalizing it, getting organized, going out and finding attorneys to help us. We raised money to pay the attorneys. So in terms of finding me and to have a result like that, I would suggest tracking me down on LinkedIn.
Very impactful work that you're doing. Just the preservation. I don't think people really understand how much we need to preserve. It's not always about development. Responsible development, I totally get. But when it's, encroaching on areas that should actually be preserved, we got to do better. We got to think better. And
the Jersey Shore has become, they're talking about Ocean County maybe having 1 million people in it by 2030, I think is what that's too much.
That's a lot. And, you don't want to be on top of each other,
And we're right adjacent to the Pine Barrens National Forest Preserve. So we have all of these, like the Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge, the Pine Barrens Preserve, and we're still trying to stick people into any nook or cranny that isn't protected. And I think that that's not going to be, history will look back on that if we do that and say, I think you guys made a mistake.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's why we have to think a little bit. We have to be a little smarter in some of our decisions. I'll just leave it at that. And I know you know what I'm talking about. But no, Tony, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Your knowledge is valuable. The work you're doing is invaluable. I really respect what you're doing.
I appreciate your reaching out and asking me to join the podcast. And if I have some news about any of these developments that we talked about, I'll be sure to reach out and maybe we can talk again.
I would love that. I think, I would love to see this grow into something nationwide, because I think it's something that could be even worldwide. But let's just start with the United States. We're a little bit behind the rest of the world. So let's just focus on cleaning up our own messes. So,
as I mentioned to you this morning, my whole yard and backyard is flooded. I got to clean up to do today as soon as I hang up, as soon as the water goes down. So
yeah, you had a huge storm. Just so people know, he's in New Jersey. There's a huge storm that came in. Everything got flooded. So yes, you will be busy today.
got the rubber gloves ready to go.
Oh, good times. Well, on that, I'm Wendy Nystrom, your host with Environmental Social Justice, Tony Kono. Thank you so much for your time. Please check out the Trashman of Brick. It's awesome work that he's doing. You guys take care.
Thank you.